David Morassutti, and we're here to talk about the Canadian Football League, the Toronto Argonauts. I guess after going 11-1, they figured they should reward some people, huh?
Yeah, a little. I mean, it kind of all started with Ryan Dinwiddie, right? They announced the coaching extension.
Actually, it started with Nick Castro.
Well,
No,
actually,
just kidding.
Dinwiddie was before Nicastro,
Was
and
he? Okay.
yeah, so Dinwiddie happened. Well, it's funny because Dinwiddie kind of said that they didn't want to announce it right away, and they kind of they had it all signed and ready to go, and then they held on to announcing it until later into the season. But like his was kind of the first. I had heard that Pinball's extension was something that they had discussed and weren't ready to kind of unveil that one yet. The one that caught everyone by surprise though was the Chad Kelly one.
Mm-hmm.
You know, obviously there were some Argos fans who were worried about what was going to happen to Chad Kelly after the big season was having. There was rumblings that he might want to explore another opportunity in the NFL. But the Argos are like, let's give you a 3-year deal, about 1.6 million bucks total to make you want to stay. So I think they gave him ample reason to want to stick around, considering how much success the team has been having too, on top of everything else.
And it leans on the cap pretty heavily.
It does. I mean, it's in the wheelhouse of what Zach Laros is getting. Zach Laros is
Mm-hmm.
getting just in the 600,000 range, and he's getting just over that. But here's the other thing that the Argos have done is as they've explained it, they've made a culture that players want to come and play for. It might be willing to maybe willing to do a little less than maybe what they would get in other teams. But I also think when you have a quarterback like Chad Kelly, you don't need to spend too much money on going to get the top receivers. Or, eventually Andrew Harris's deal is going to come up and he's not going to be, they can go with some younger guys behind, if AJ Olette is part of the long term future behind him, right? Like when you go and you pay your quarterback a lot more money than you're paying this year, there will be some adjustments that they have to make to accommodate that new deal, no doubt. But when you have a Chad Kelly at quarterback and that's leading your team and is playing at an MOP level, you do not want to let Chad Kelly go.
The big, I think, I agree. The big thing I think that matters, um, it's for me, it's not as much that you can get away with finding or paying less for receivers. You're leaning on your resources that you have in finding players, retaining players, and being able to predict that a player you're paying $55,000 a year is playing like a $200,000 player, which the Argos have right now in some players, which is why a Markeith Ambles, for example, was traded because they had a younger player that they paid a lot less actually, and the difference between Markeith Ambles and the receiver, insert name here whoever you wish, but just to make the point anyway, and that player basically helps pay the quarterback's salary. When that player becomes you can pay a player at their value, which is great. But what the cap is all about in every sport, it's not just football. Some sports more than others, I grant you. But the point is, in the cap world, you have to find players who are punching at a higher weight than their pay. That's what you have to do, especially if you want to win. You have to bring players in who are, and I say this with all love and respect to the athletes, who are underpaid. And when it comes time to pay them what they're due, you have to make a tough decision. And that is, did we find somebody that can replace that player and that we can get a player almost as good and who may be as good or better shortly and not pay him? This sounds terrible, I know, but it's a reality. And that's the juggling that has to be done with the cap. So you're going to get players who have a really good reputation, who have a great history, but their value eliminates the possibility of you carrying them. That's the reality of let's say specifically the Canadian Football League.
Yeah, and actually, we got a comment here in the comments here saying it also helps that Toronto plays on 90% real grass.
Yeah,
I think that does help. I know a lot of players definitely do appreciate the fact that they can play on grass. Unfortunately, they can't practice on said grass. They can only play on the grass. So yeah, that definitely helps too. I just think the management team that Toronto has right now, and we've also need to mention that Pinball Clemens has also been extended. We don't know how long he's around for, but just to know that he is sticking around. But they found ways, as you said, the Canadian Football League. It's not just about finding the top players and keeping them. It's about surrounding them with those. I hate to call them cheaper options, but the guys who are not getting the top end dollar, right? You know,
absolutely.
eventually you can only pay guys so much in the Canadian Football. There's a salary cap, but we've been told that maybe there isn't a salary cap too. That also
There is a salary.
explains some of it as well. The CFL finally admits when teams go over the salary cap as well. Although I've heard that there's been the uh, what's been reported isn't exactly what's actually happening, but that's hearsay in my regard. But you know, the this is something that Winnipeg's been able to do for since let's say 2019, since they built their championship team. It's what other teams have struggled to figure out because there's been so much turnover with the other teams. What I think Toronto is trying to avoid is that turnover. There's been way too much turnover over the years. They want stability. They want to not only protect the present and put focus on the present, but securing and ensuring the future of the team.
In other words, identify what your core is and don't lose any of your core because you can't pay them and or they don't want to be here. And your backup players, your second tier, if you will, the younger players that will work into the core, right? The main core of the team affords them the opportunity to replace someone in the core with a new player, which is what I said before, and I'm just saying it a little differently. So yeah, it's important. You got to find players, right? But that's only part of the issue. You can bring in the best players that are out there, but you also have to integrate them into your squad. You have to teach them how to play the Canadian game because at least half of them are American. And even the half that are Canadian, they have to understand how your team is playing. Because even though they're Canadian playing a Canadian game, they're playing for the Toronto Argonauts or Saskatchewan Roughriders or the Montreal Alouettes or the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. So there has to be this transitory plan that works for individuals that arrive at camp.
Yeah, and right now, the Argos are in a situation, obviously, with clinching the East, where they can now take a step back and kind of reevaluate and reestablish certain things that they wanted to have at the beginning of the year that they really didn't have the chance to do. Right, bring new guys into the fold and get them comfortable with what needs to happen as well. I think you see what the Argos, the approach that they have taken this season, which is we're going to go 1-0 each and every week. Don't let themselves get too bogged down on making sure that they're,
On
um,
any individual week,
yeah,
not let any individual
I,
week affect them adversely, positively, short term, that
I,
kind of stuff.
I mean, I wouldn't call it a boo boo, but I did something that I shouldn't have done. And I asked Ryan Dinwiddie about Winnipeg coming up. And he's like, that's not even in my radar right now. I'm
Well,
like, yeah, David, you should have known that. Like,
that's a couple of weeks down the road.
that's a couple weeks down the road. But he did tell me that in a game like that, they're not going to show everything that they want to show. They want to do against Winnipeg,
Absolutely.
the Grey Cup, right? That's what these games are going to be for, right? The thing is the Argos might not have as much to play for on paper, but the teams are going to be going up against. They got a lot to play for. I look at the team that they got on Saturday against Hamilton, coming off wins against both BC and Winnipeg. You, Frank, you've always been the one calming down Ticats fans. I think a lot of them owe you a debt of gratitude for not hopping off the bandwagon as soon as they did.
Well, I love the game. This league is awesome, and every franchise has their character.
Mm.
Some franchises need a little love and love and comfort, because they've had some really bad years. And by bad years, if we sit here and talk about Hamilton specifically, the fans in Hamilton feel like they're indebted, like they deserve better. And instead of getting better, they got what I think is the opposite in their minds. But patience in the Canadian Football League is something that you need to understand. We talk every week, and I'm a firm believer of this. The difference between winning and losing is very slim. As slim as a healthy quarterback, as slim as a receiving core that's healthy, as slim as a defense not missing an integral player that makes the defense, stirs the drink, if you will. So all these little things, I'm not saying it comes down always to one player. It can come down to one group think. It's all about confidence. And, you know, we have a couple of examples even better than Hamilton, the Edmonton Elks. I mean, this is a team that couldn't win. You know what they're doing? They're finding out how to, and they're showing us they can. And they haven't. Changed the lineup that much. Okay, they changed quarterbacks. Okay, I get that, but they didn't just change one quarterback. They went through a, a little rotation of quarterbacks. So, and I'm not trying to take any credit away from Trey Ford because he's a great young quarterback and he does have he does have the skills required to be a good quarterback and to lead a team in the Canadian Football League. But the point is, he's one player. Some might suggest that's the difference in the Edmonton Elks. And that's what the Canadian Football League and football. You have 53 players that you've got in the group, and it can come down to a player or two to make the difference between winning and losing.
I think it's the confidence in that one player, right?
That
If-
too. Absolutely. That prevails.
Right? Like a team that like the Elks were a team that was deflated because the quarterbacking play was undoing anything really good that they might have been doing. But then when you get a quarterback like Trey Ford coming in and playing with confidence and providing that spark, also Kevin Brown deserves a little bit of a shout out there too. The running back there, make himself a name in this league now. Um, it certainly does help. It certainly does help. My issue with the Elks is you got off to such a poor start. I understand now you're 4-2 since starting the season 0-8. Is it too much for them to overcome, right? Because unless another team in front of them starts to lose, and that could be Hamilton in the crossover. Maybe
Hmm.
Saskatchewan comes down to earth a little bit,
Not after what they did last week.
right? So
Okay.
two straight tough losses for Saskatchewan kind of puts them in a tough position, but they also have Ottawa this week.
This is why they say that every game matters. You need a good start to your season because if you put yourself behind the eight ball, they call it being behind an eight ball for a reason. And I'd like to say hi to Buckshot Kid as well. And just a quick comment on his question. They're going to talk about the XFL USL SFL merger, if it happens, and how it could affect the CFL. Answer is no, it won't affect the Canadian Football League, just like anything that goes on outside of the NFL does not affect the Canadian Football League. The good news is, and we say this every week, I say this every week, I believe this to my core, there are plenty of football players to provide the XFL, the USFL, even if they don't merge, if they have independent leagues, and the Canadian Football League. There are plenty of football players. How it affects the Canadian Football League, unfortunately, I would hope the other way I think it might affect it is now they're on CBS, and I wish the Canadian Football League could get whether it's on CBS or somewhere else. It would be awesome if people in the United States gave it a chance, and the Canadian Football League could, get some traction in the United States. So as far as the effect of the XFL and USFL merging, not a big deal for me. The big thing is, can CBS do something to gain traction in the Canadian Football League?
Yeah,
That's my comment on that.
I mean, we haven't seen the CFL lose massive talent to the USFL or even the XFL. I think what it does, it provides options for players. I think more leagues is a good thing, and the timing of it's different too. This is spring football, and I think with the XFL it'll remain spring football. They don't want to go up against the NFL for ratings, and the CFL is good because the CFL is a summer/fall league, right? So it just all depends on, and look, the CFL has been around for so long. I think players are starting to realize, especially the ones that left, maybe we shouldn't have left because
Absolutely.
they had it good in the CFL for what that was provided for them.
That's what we're learning, and every time it happens, we learn, and I think the players, along with us, the fans of the Canadian Football League, we begin to respect and appreciate the league that is the Canadian Football League. The continuity, the level of play year in, year out. We are now, thank goodness, a couple of years out of the pandemic. And the good news is we're seeing the result of the Canadian Football League being able, this is an Argo follower, someone who covers the Argos, with all the oars in the water finally. When the pandemic came, there was one oar in the water and we were going around in circles. And I don't mean the Argos, I mean the league.
Yeah.
So now all the oars in the water rowing in the same direction. We know the rules that the Canadian Football League has established are great rules. The game has improved, and a lot of the credit goes to the Canadian Football League and to people like Randy Ambrosi, who silently does the work that needs to be done, or at least lead his team to do the work that needs to be done to make this game as good as it can be and take advantage of the talent available to the Canadian Football League, to the appreciation of the fans of the Canadian Football League. We are really in a situation here in the Canadian Football League. Um, you know, we were in a real tough place, and now, hopefully with the way the games are being played and the teams the way they're playing, with Edmonton improving, and now we're ending up in a situation where, maybe if Ottawa could, finally win a game instead of losing it in the last couple of minutes, we could have ourselves a league with 9 teams that fans would have hope with, because essentially from the fan perspective, that's all you want from your team: hope, right? You want to have hope. And if you're a connoisseur of the game like I think I am, it doesn't matter which game I watch. I enjoy the game not based on the color of the jersey, but the content of the game. And as far as I'm concerned, the content of the game has improved a lot in the past couple of years, and I see it improving even more, which takes us back to BSK, who was talking about how does the XFL and USFL affect the Canadian Football League, period, not just if they um, when we put the games side by side, come on. There's no comparison between those leagues and the Canadian Football League. So, it helps the Canadian Football League. For anybody who sneaks a peek at what's going on at the XFL or the USFL, you've got to be happy with the Canadian Football League. I mean, if your team's not doing well, I get that. If your team has hope, if your team's doing well, there's no comparison.
Yeah, I think this what I've learned this year is that CFL fans need to be stop being so preoccupied by what the other leagues are doing and focus on
Absolutely.
what your league is trying to accomplish, right? Because here's the one thing: the advantage that the CFL has always had is it's right in people's backyards, right? As much as people love the NFL, not everyone has the access to an NFL game. This is their option. This is their option to go and watch a football game if they really want to watch it live. So that's why, like, to me, I don't see people in Canada running to go watch the USL for the XFL. Not a chance. They would rather watch the CFL. It's a more exciting game. Players are. It's a more established league as well, and it's the second best league behind the NFL. The numbers prove it. The fact that they've been able to keep their league around, without having to fold like these other ones I think that should have ended any of those ideas of the CFL losing any sort of interest from fans north of the border.
That's why it's so important. That little emblem that you see in the right side, top right, the big A there, not the Argo A, the Atlantic A. And I can't wait till the Canadian Football League expands. There's 10 teams in this league. It will have a very good effect on the Canadian Football League. Just starting with the biggest weekend in football in Canada and the Canadian Football League. Everybody knows what it is. It's Labor Day weekend. And it'll just be awesome to be able to have a natural competition between two natural competitors, Quebec and, of course, the Atlantic provinces, which, that expansion team, if we're fortunate enough for that to be the team. But if, there's a dark horse in this, there's a dark horse, it could be another team in Quebec. Can you imagine Labor Day games between two teams in Quebec? Oh, gee, Alberta, Ontario, right? And Quebec. It'll be awesome. Like the Canadian Football League. Look, guys, the biggest challenge we have when it comes to the Canadian Football League isn't the XFL, isn't the USFL. It's us. It's those of us that love the game, um, finding friends and or others who learn to love the game. So for me, since the day that I started doing this kind of stuff, it's just hey, I'm a bald-faced supporter of the Canadian Football League. Go ahead, throw your stuff at me, call me biased, call me all that stuff. I'm okay with it. I love the Canadian Football League. I love football, and I love the idea. Mm, it's a long drive now because of where I live. I'm an hour and a half out of Toronto. I drive an hour and a half to go watch a football game, to cover a football game. I could drive 2 hours to catch another one. I'm not that far from Hamilton. I'm not that far from Toronto, really. And I just think I'm very fortunate that I can go watch live football. And folks, I don't care what anybody says. I think most people agree with me. Most people, and if you're watching this and you're telling people and you've never been to a live football game, shame on you because you don't know what you're missing. A live football game is one of the most exciting things to watch. And don't forget about the tailgating. I don't know if I should mention that stuff and the tailgating too. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. Football's a lot of fun. The Buffalo Bills, we're lucky in Southern Ontario because an hour and change, an hour and a half from Toronto to Buffalo, you can watch an NFL game. Hey, look, I'm not one of these people. As much as I'm telling you, I love the Canadian Football League, and that's sincere. I love covering it. It's true. What else is true? Is that football is football. If the Buffalo Bills are playing and there's no Canadian Football League, pretty fortunate they can drive an hour and a half to still see football.
No, they're very we are fortunate to be, especially in the mecca of Toronto, to have all these options available. I will say
Hmm.
that. Um, so and that's something the Argos have been having a struggle with. I will say that has really eaten into the Argos is that they're unfortunately having to go up against the NFL. They have to go up against the NHL, NBA, MLB, There's so many options, and also in Toronto, it's very expensive to live in Toronto. So people are now at the point of their lives where it's just like, you know what, just not into wanting to spend money on a football game. That's the reality of it too. And yep, and we also, and as Buckshot also says, we also have two OUA teams. You got the University of Toronto, you got York University, who unfortunately don't get enough talk just because, only in really the small towns do those schools really thrive and get the attention they do deserve.
BSK, I hope you don't mind. I'm going to put your comment there. People can read it. Apparently, I can do that. I didn't know that. So
Uh-oh.
there it is. There it is. And yes, Toronto has two university teams, York and U of T, and you want to take that hour and a half, and you can watch a lot of football. And yes, the point being that there's a lot of good football. And the same can be true said about university football in CIS football in Canada. It doesn't get the kind of respect it deserves. I think it's on parallel tracks with the Canadian Football League. In as far as good football, it just doesn't get the kind of respect it deserves.
No, I agree. I think, but that's just what the infrastructure is. But and not everything has to be big time, because then it puts a lot of extra pressure on these kids too. Let's not forget, like that's asking a lot of kids who really maybe football's not what they are. That's not their first endeavor, right? They want to use football because they love playing football, or they're using football to get themselves a better future, better education. I have no issues with that, right? Like that's admirable that's what they want to do.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about the football games that were played this past week. Obviously, I got to tell you, I sit here in amazement. Watching. I guess we can start with the Friday game, which was Toronto and Montreal, 23-20. The Argonauts. All I'm gonna say about this game is it was an important game that they needed to win to get to clinch first. Because if they didn't win this game, it would get harder to clinch first. you know, the momentum thing.
Yeah, I mean, you just don't want to leave that window open, right? You want to shut that window. You want to make sure that there's no doubt that that is going to be it's yours. And it's funny because I would say after the 6-6, 7-0, 8-0, like at that point it should have been it was Toronto's division, right? But you can't say that until it's actually a thing, right? So but they've maintained a great mentality in that nothing was going to, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Nothing was going to deviate them from what their plan was.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Edmonton did themselves a favor, as you discussed and as you pointed out. The Saskatchewan Roughriders stand in the way of them making the playoffs. Um, and this was a game that I think both quarterbacks played really well. I know Trey Ford, he threw a touchdown and he threw an interception, but Jake Delagulla in the loss is looking more and more like they won't miss Trevor Harris.
Well, you asked this if Trevor Harris came back, do you see a quarterback change happening? That's really tough when your team's in the thick of a playoff race to say, sorry, man. I know you've done us so well so far, but we got to bring back Trevor Harris. That'd be a tough call. But at the same time, Trevor Harris didn't lose the job. It just kind of he didn't lose the job because it was an injury. But that's the nature of it. And Trevor's been in the similar case before.
Yep,
Unfortunately, he's been in a case where he's taken over for the backup, get his team to the playoffs, and then get started taken out of the starting job for that quarterback. If you remember when he took over for Ricky Ray, at
right.
the same time it was Ricky Ray. I don't know how you can tell Ricky Ray he's not allowed to finish the job that he started, right? So
Absolutely.
it's a tough situation, unfortunately for I think Dolagallo's deserved more. He's deserved more than what he's getting in terms of results.
Wins and losses. Yep.
But at the same time, this is what it takes in the CFL. Those who are able to just keep working at it and know that the results are going to come. They're the ones that usually see the rewards of it at the end.
Yeah. Three TDs, one interception. This is one of the things that makes, in my opinion, a team have an opportunity to win. Um, Trey Ford took advantage, and then unfortunately, the Saskatchewan offense fell asleep in the fourth quarter. They were outscored 16 points, 16-0. So that kind of consistency is required. In fact, that's what the Elks were guilty of there for a few weeks, and Saskatchewan sort of they're wearing the green like Edmonton, but they didn't wear the yellow.
No, no, not at all. And that's coaching staff. That's kind of always been.
Oh, okay. There's David.
We back.
Yep. Is it? I'm back or you're back? What happened?
I think we both. I don't. I saw the you froze.
Well, I don't know which you he referred to. Anyway, what we're talking about was, of course, Saskatchewan, and thank you, Buckshot. I'm glad you were still there. You're the only one still around. Um, anyway, we're talking about Edmonton and Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan proved the fact that they need to play a little better. They didn't. Edmonton, listen, Edmonton looks really good. The standings, if I pull them up, there we go. There's the standings, and we look at how important the win by Edmonton. They're now 4-10. Saskatchewan is 6-7. 4-10 equals 14. 6-7 equals 13. Saskatchewan has 2 wins more with one less game played. So Saskatchewan's in the driver's seat, needless to say. But Edmonton, the same is true with Hamilton. They're only 2 wins behind Hamilton, and depending on the record playing against each team, Hamilton they have to have more points than Saskatchewan. They just have a better record against them, and they could tie them and get in. So you know. A lot. There's still a lot of games left. I mean, Saskatchewan has 5 games left, and Edmonton has 4 games. You know, we talked, remember a couple of weeks ago, we talked that, what are the chances if Edmonton, runs the table? Well, they've done the next best thing to running the table. They're 4-2.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, some of the losses I was I was thinking to
Yeah.
myself is like
Yeah.
I lost against Calgary. That's a team that they're going to have to try to leapfrog. The other thing too is the head-to-head records are going to come into play if these
Oh, yeah.
guys eventually tie at the end of the season too. So I do think that there has to Edmonton. There's no margin for error,
None.
zero. Like if they lose their next game, I think it's just gonna be too much for them to have to overcome.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and with Saskatchewan, it's almost like that's their spot to lose. I don't personally see Calgary being a team that should be a concern. Obviously, you always have to be concerned about any team that's chasing in the standings, but I don't see Calgary as a team where I'm like, you know what, we have to really take care of business against them. To me, they haven't done enough to prove to me that they're a playoff team.
In Saskatchewan, the coaching of Dickinson is being called into question. A lot of people are very unhappy with the record of the team. I think he's getting blamed for all the failures in the past couple of years under his watch. That's part of the program, right? Is it his fault? Well, some people can say that. I have to say that from a management perspective, um, I think there's some guilt there a little bit and then I mean GM and coach. And then the luck of the draw with the quarterback health has been a bit of an issue for them as well. And I keep saying that you lose your number one quarterback, you pretty much lose the season if you don't have somebody that rises up. A backup does yeoman's work to at least keep the team in the hunt for a playoff spot.
Yeah, I mean it's tough, right? And there's not how many teams have that depth, right? Not many teams do, and if they do, they're very, very fortunate.
And if they do, and some of us don't know it, neither do they, because when the season started, Dalagala wasn't the guy that was going to win them some football games and throw some touchdowns. The same thing's true in Edmonton when the season started. Trey Ford wasn't the guy that was going to be there. And look at the guy in Hamilton, Powell. I mean, this is the Canadian Football League and what makes it great. The more they can find quarterbacks that plug and play in the Canadian Football League, regardless of their reputations, the better we'll be. I'm very happy and very content with those three quarterbacks in particular because they're saving the season, not just for their teams, they're saving the season for our league. And
Yeah,
yes, I said our league.
uh, yeah. I mean, it's tough, right? That's a tough. And Buckshot's right. I think Calgary can afford to have one or a couple of seasons where they're not the talk of the CFL, considering what they've done over the years. That is very true, but we also want to see competitiveness from each and every team, right? It just makes the games that much more, that much more entertaining, much more, you don't want to get people not to tune into a game, let's just say. So I think for Calgary, as much as, yeah, this season has been a tough one for them, the fact that they're still kind of in the ballpark gives at least fans a reason to go to the games and watch too. That's the other thing I don't think people talk about enough, about those situations that those teams find themselves in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. He wanted to let people know that the word he was meant to use was fall, not hall. But
No,
that's okay.
sorry, no,
That's okay.
my brain can't compute in there.
The next game is the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, Hamilton Tiger Cats, and going into this game, no one should have thought that Winnipeg could win this game because Winnipeg has been unable to win in Hamilton in recent memory, except for the Grey Cup in the past few years.
I
So Hamilton was Winnipeg was up against it. The previous games dictated that Hamilton was going to win this game.
Yeah, I mean, I was stunned. I was stunned, right? 'Cause Hamilton's found ways to lose games that mean a lot, and then a game like this would have been an easy one to say, you know what, I don't think we can compete against a Winnipeg. What do they do? They go and win the damn thing, right?
Good for
But
them.
good for them. No, it is good for them, right? Like that's a
And good
team.
for their fans. I mean,
They need it. They needed it for sure. But that's also a case where was those efforts earlier in the year, right? Where were those efforts, when Schultz was in at quarterback, when Bo Levi Mitchell was in at quarterback, right? Why is it taking until now for it to all kind of figure out?
well,
Right?
because
If I'm a Hamilton fan, that's what I'm asking.
excuse me, I think the answer is very simple. It's the horse, the elephant's in the room. Milanovic took over offensive coordinator position. The team has changed with him, with his leadership on offense. I
Yes.
think he deserves a lot of credit there, David. And the guy knows he was an offensive coordinator in Montreal before he came to Toronto, won 2 Grey Cups. Guy knows what he's doing.
Apparently, it's just people are probably all wondering where was this, when the team was in the dumps. You're gonna wonder if this change should have been made going into the season.
I think the writing was on the wall. That's why he was brought in. It basically is. Hamilton has done that numerous times. In fact, their head coach now came in, and there was a coach in place who bowed out to let him become the head coach. Hamilton's notorious for bringing people looking over other people's shoulders. There's 2 things that Hamilton Tiger Cats have in their history, regardless of their ownership. They bring in quarterbacks that had success on other teams or are long in the tooth. They bring them, and many times they have success in Hamilton. And they also bring management types who don't have a position on the team at the moment, but you have a feeling that if something goes wrong, they're going to be the one in charge. Hamilton's notorious for it. Is that a bad thing? Heck no. That's the way it goes. You know, we as fans, we love the players that put on our uniform, the uniform that we support. Once they take that uniform off and someone else puts it on, What do fans do? They support that player. They go to another team. They don't support him that much. That the Canadian Football League, more than any other league, they still maintain there's a level of love by some fans and players who move along. I've seen that as well. So there is the exception that makes the rule. The point is that it's all about winning. You know, the reality is, if you don't win, changes happen, and teams that don't make changes when the team isn't winning, they don't win. You got to change things up. And Hamilton did that. They finally, we talked earlier. What did we say earlier? 53 players, you know what? 10 coaches. You make one change, look at the difference in Hamilton. This is the whole point. The difference between winning and losing is it's a small, thin margin. And it's about identifying what will change the outcome. And that's where guys like Pinball Clemens come in, right? That's where upper management comes in, looking down at a team and going, yeah, I think we got to make this change. This is why, if I can go back to the Argos and talk about the contracts that they signed, this was the perfect time to make all these signings, because now at this point there isn't there is no distraction with the contracts. There is a distraction, but the distraction is irrelevant, right? If the Argos lose now because the team's going, oh, new contracts, what am I going to get? You know, that kind of distraction, if you know what I'm saying. This is a perfect time to do it. They've already captured first place, and now they got a couple of games to sort of check out what's going on and the fallout from these new contracts with these people, right? Like the quarterback, the GM, blah, blah, they even Mickey Donovan is right. He got a bump too. So this is all about. I didn't mean to go to the Argos. I'm just trying to explain something where sometimes it's about doing things at a certain time makes a difference. And in this case, an opportunity came up where they could do all these signings and it didn't rock the boat, no pun intended.
Well, that's the thing, right? There's no egos involved with the
Right.
Argos. Zero egos whatsoever. I mean, Pinball is the leader of that, right? Like he's the one that
I'd
kind of
say their quarterback has a bit of an ego. He has a bit of a, in the sense that, he's got that sparkle in his eye that says he's a little bit cocky, right? But what quarterback do you want that doesn't have any kind of level of cockiness?
exactly right. You want that's the thing at the quarterback position. If you don't have a guy who's confident in his ability and cocky in a little way, um, like even I know sometimes it rubs people a different way, but to me, that's just a guy who's competitive and knows that that's how he has to be to be a winner in his eyes.
Right. Well, confidence. We talked about it earlier. I mean, confidence is developed in different ways, right? But there has to be a home for it inside a player's heart and his, it's important. It's important that a player have that self value and that self confidence. You know, and when I say cockiness, it's just a belief in oneself. I mean, if you're overly, there's that too, right? You can go
Right.
past the point that's best, right? So it's all and besides, like BSK says, the Ticats have a really good owner to go back to where we were. That he offers the money for the organization and the freedom for the organization to do things that may not seem right or obviously right. He'll let the organization and the people in charge do things. And under his own, Bob Young has been a very patient man. We saw him last year when they lost to the Argonauts in this in the East. Sorry, when they lost now I forgot. Was Hamilton beat Montreal, right?
Hamilton lost to Montreal. Montreal
Okay.
won to go to the
In
East.
that game that has, I'm having a brain cramp. The point I'm trying to make is they showed the owner in the owner's box, and he was not a happy camper. He was almost sadder and upset and frustrated that night more than he was when they lost the Grey Cup against. I remember seeing and spending some time with him. Then he was disappointed that time when they lost the Grey Cup.
Right, and that's what a good owner does. A good owner shows patience and belief, right? But
Yeah,
at some point, you have to look past that if you want to get to your ultimate goal, which is to win a
Absolutely.
Grey Cup. And I'm sorry, the CFL is not going to keep offering you chances to win that Grey Cup at home. Although, if you ask Tiger Cat fans, they don't care if they win at home. They just care if they win it. It's just nicer if they could win at home because then, you could have as many Tiger Cats fans there as possible.
Remember that thing called hope? If they beat Toronto this weekend, they will have the right to think that they could make it to the Grey Cup if they can beat the Argos this weekend. Even if obviously the Argos play with a let's say a lineup that is built to rest and keep players healthy for the end of the season. Even if that happens, there's going to be a little bump in the confidence of the fans as much as the team, and good on them. Enjoy it, enjoy it. It's something that if they earn that right, enjoy it. And it's great that Hamilton is coming back. I'm not sitting here going on promoting the idea of the Argos suck when we go to BMO. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is though, it's nice that that city, that town, that load of football fans has something to cheer. And like I said, it's about the game. It's the games for me that matter.
It does matter, right? And these games do matter in a lot of ways for these teams because you look at Hamilton again. As I said, they got to renew confidence, right? That they can. I mean, with the way Montreal's played lately, you just win that one game, just like they did back in 2021, right? Yeah, and they only care about winning a Libre. Well, that didn't really go their way this year. But again, 2021, what happened? The Argos won first in the East, but Hamilton got that one victory against Montreal. They had beaten Toronto, I think, at one point in the season, and they knew they could win that game. Didn't matter that history wasn't on their side, right? We all know about if you're a team that comes in and into the East final against a team that has the bye, you're in a tough place to try to win that game. Then in that case, right? So I think that's something that I think Hamilton fans should be happy about is that it's happened before in the past. They have knocked off the top team in the East. My thing is, this is not the same old Argos team, especially that year. This is a totally different Argos team.
That was a team in building formation.
Exactly, right?
Bless you.
Thank you. Right? That's a team that established a focus that every game matters to them, right? And they're not going to let that, be dissuaded by, one by one game, right? They're not going to let that happen. And look, what the thing about the Argos too, and I'll say this for anyone that's saying, "Oh, well, the Argos are due for a loss in a game like that." They've had games where they should have lost this year, and they found a way to win. And right, they found ways. That's a mark of a good team, in my opinion. You win, finding ways to win games that should be a loss. I mean, Montreal, the game against Montreal this past weekend. I had to rewatch that game because I had a prior commitment. But watching that, I'm like, Toronto ended up winning this game,
Mm-hmm.
right? But there's been a lot of those games for Toronto this year. They just
Yeah.
find a
Well,
way.
it's the mirror image of what Edmonton was earlier in the season and Ottawa is now, which, with the couple of minutes that we have left, Red Blacks, Lions. Um, the Red Blacks are the only team in the Canadian Football League right now, in my opinion, just my opinion. Some Calgary might suggest for them as well, but the frustration for the fans has to be burgeoning right now to an extent that is high compression. There's there I'm ready to blow up on this team for gosh sakes. I mean, uh, so frustrating to watch them and how they lose and how frustrating it must be for them in the locker room, but and of course the fans in the stands. And it makes room for great finishes for teams like the Lions, who I don't think I think they know they got off lucky to win this game. I really do. And they deserve the win. Look, I'm not here to say I'm not here. I don't believe in revisionist history. The end of the game is the end of the game. The score of the game is the score of the game. We can talk about how a team blew chances, which Ottawa did, but it doesn't change the fact that the BC Lions deserved to win and they won.
They did, right? I'm thinking of watching that game. I saw this game live, and Otto goes for that long field goal.
Oh boy.
Just like
Oh, and we
you,
know that's possible, right? That's one of the things that happens when you go for a long field goal. You don't have downfield coverage by your special teams.
right? You better hope that either this hits or it misses and he's not able to return this. I've seen teams go for it. You know what? Even if we miss, it might not work out badly for us. That changed the entire game, and then I'm seeing it all implode in front of me for Ottawa, and I'm just going, how do you recover from a loss like this? That's a loss that, as a
They've
fan,
had too many of these, David. This isn't the only one. This is the frustrating part of the whole
this is
thing.
the
They've had
worst
too many
one.
of these.
The thing is, this was the worst one. There's been a lot
Absolutely.
of these, but this one
Absolutely.
was on another level of bad. Like, what in the world? It was going to the point where it's like, all right, chalk it up as a loss for BC, have to regroup. And Ottawa just complete meltdown.
Here's my impression of the press box when you have a coach in the press box and he's watching your convert turn into 2 points for the opposition. We had one of those this weekend too, and I don't remember the last time I saw one of those. A return of a convert
It's
attempt.
been a long. I mean, the last time I remember seeing it was when Toronto tried against Saskatchewan last year. But that was a game. It was just before the half. They're like, we have a few minutes. This is the last play of the half. If we don't make it, we'll just stop it, and we'll get back. And then we'll just go into the locker room. And then Saskatchewan's like, no, we're gonna return this for a touchdown and make you regret that decision. It's the only other time I've ever seen that happen in a game. Fortunately for Toronto, they found out a way to win that game. Um, but it's timing too. It's timing of the game. It's making those decisions in the right moments. So it doesn't cripple what you're trying to do for your. It doesn't cripple your team. That needs as much goodwill as they need right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So they lose 41-37 to
God.
BC. They literally give the game away. The frustration that the fans must feel is devastating. But here's the thing, and this is the part that I find yes, yeah, they did. That's exactly what I was referring to. He's just reminding us, and that's what we were talking about. Um, th- Ottawa is that close to being a good competitive team. We've seen them all season cough up victories. That's got to be frustrating. And to whose feet do you lay that? The head coach, the GM, the quarterback, the offense, the defense, the special teams, all of them. All of them. They've all taken their turn, kicking the game back to the other team. I'm talking on behalf of the Ottawa Red Black fans right now. Hey, guys, get your Schmidt together. I mean, really, get your Schmidt together. This is ridiculous. My goodness. Holy mackerel. Come on, guys. And by the way, I'm not criticizing you. This is constructive criticism. I'm not trying to demean or insult Red Black football players, just saying what I think a lot of people are feeling, including they themselves. I mean, they're looking in the mirror and saying, what the heck are we doing? What's going on? I forgot how to play football. My goodness. My goodness. I want to see this team straighten out because I'd love to see 9 teams in the Canadian Football League all playing good football. Boy, will that make an interesting last 5-6 weeks of the season for everybody, because Toronto, I don't agree with you that Toronto's, well, I don't know if you're saying that Toronto's invincible. I don't think they're
No,
invincible. I don't think any team is invincible. So any team, on any given Sunday, as the quote goes, can win, right? And in Canadian football leagues, by definition, the Canadian Football League, on any given weekend, any Canadian football team can lose. And I got to tell you, it's a lot of fun seeing a team like Edmonton straighten things out. Calgary's on the cusp. Ottawa, you really got to clean up your stuff, man. You got to get it together. Your fans deserve it. And those of us that watch your team play, I was actually pulling for Ottawa. Not that I'm anti not that I'm anti BC, but I just wanted to see them win a game they deserved to win.
you have to create your own breaks, right? You know, I do agree that no team should ever be considered invincible because we have seen teams feel that way and they've come away with a loss in the most
Absolutely.
important games. But a team that works hard and avoids the mental mistakes they get rewarded with the breaks in the end, right? Some people say, "Oh, the football gods weren't on their side." Well, did they do anything special to earn any help from the football gods? Because I think that's something that doesn't get talked about enough
Mm.
too, right? You need to create your own luck in some cases too.
Yeah, that's a cop out. Blaming or trying to credit the gods. The gods don't care about what's going on the
No.
football field. They care about the people, if that's what you believe. They care about the people as people on the field, not necessarily how the outcome of the game goes. And yes, it is the responsibility of every player on a team to preserve the confidence and the hope that a team has of winning. And unfortunately, this Ottawa team has seen some hopeless losses, and I call them hopeless because how hopeless can how hopeless, how much more than hopeless is losing a game that you should have won? In a matter of seconds, not even minutes, losing a game that's played for 60 minutes in a matter of seconds. Come on, man. Let's go. I mean, I'm hoping and I believe that Ottawa's going to figure things out. Unfortunately, it's getting to be the window may have closed already. They haven't been, mathematically eliminated, but for all intents and purposes, they need to win. They got to do what Edmonton's doing, and for them, 4-2 is not enough.
No, no, not at all. And that's a team right there that I think needs to realize what's the shortcomings and plan for next year. Right? Like they get the advantage now of saying, you know what, we're gonna take a step back and we're just gonna work towards the next year, right? As BSK says here, I think next year the Redblacks will be good. If they're not by Labor Day, people will be fired. But if they're good, the crossover might come from the East. I think the East has improved drastically. I don't think that's wrong at
Absolutely.
all. But Ottawa's got a lot of work to do if they want to be in that conversation. Now, a lot of these losses can be chalked up to mistakes being made and, right, and fixable mistakes. I think that's one thing, but also they got to get their quarterback back. Or
Yeah,
if they're not going with that quarterback, find somebody else. I'm sorry to have to say this, and look, I have a lot of faith in what I've seen from Jeremiah Mazzoli when he's healthy, but at
I
some
don't think he's
point,
coming back. I don't think he's coming back.
yeah, at some point, someone's got to say, you know what, we need to go in a different direction because we can't do this anymore.
They looked like they had a guy, and Crum just literally crumbled. He had those two games that he won. That literally he won. We talked about the difference between winning and losing. He won those two games, but he lost that magic touch that he had in his first two games since. He's had opportunities to, revisit that magic. Mm-mm, mm-mm. And then there's also been games, like I said, it's not any individual, it's not any individual group. It's not the offense, the defense, special teams, coaching staff, general manager, whatever. It's not, and it's been a team accomplishment playing the way they've played and losing.
I just think that, it's the one position that has been an issue with them for far too long.
Yep. Mazzoli
There,
was supposed to be the solution.
there are going to be quarterbacks out there, I think.
Well,
This
look at Harris might become available,
Harris might become available. Bo Levi Mitchell
depending on a
might become
decision.
available if teams want to go through that route again. There are going to be guys available. It's just a matter of will they be willing to go to Ottawa and into that situation? Because that's the other thing too. Is yeah, you know what they might. Some players might like that challenge. Other players might be like, you know what, that's too much of a upper project for me to have to deal with.
Absolutely. David, this was fun, buddy.
Always fun, Frank.
Yeah, looking forward to the weekend. What a great game it's going to be. The we're going to end up with the Hamilton fans coming back to BMO Field. The last game in Toronto didn't have that many Hamilton fans. I suspect we'll be back to the regular level of Hamilton fans in Toronto this weekend. And if you're a Toronto Argonaut fan, come by and check out what it's like to see a Toronto Argonaut game against the Hamilton Tiger Cats. If you've never been to a Canadian Football League game, this is one that'll be worth coming to, regardless of who you support, if either of the teams is what you support. Well, David, thanks for doing this. And the rest of you, thanks for watching. And a special Buckshot Kid, thanks for sharing some of your views. If you'd like to share your views, we'll do it. Frank just learned how to do this. So, I can put what you say on the screen. I get to read it first. So if you speak like an adult, we'll put you on the screen. If you don't, I'll send David after you. Until next time, everybody, for David Morassutti, I'm Candid Frank Stanishi. Thank you for watching CFL Talk.